Now, one of the issues in this layout of the text, and kind of the way I should probably use a different color or something. Verse 6 is kind of set apart. We've had the promise, as he's gone out in this visionary context outside to look at the stars, and the Lord says, your descendants are going to be beyond number in the future. He's the promise of many nations that would come forth from Abraham. And again, that's going to unfold. But in the flow of the text, the initial stage is that it wants to tell you that Abraham is trusting God at this point. Now, in the next chapter, 16, we see in the provision of Hagar, by which Ishmael is produced as an heir of the household, another way of, in the ancient Near Eastern world, of producing an heir. So the adoption of Eliezer, number one, later the use of a concubine to produce an heir, are the normal ways in the ancient Near Eastern world. And we have lots of literature in the background of ancient Near Eastern texts that tell us about these concepts and cultural values and cultural practices of the ancient world. One of the books that I meant to highlight last week is the Zondervan Illustrated Bible Backgrounds Commentary on the Old Testament. Volume 1 deals with the Pentateuch. Again, this is the Zondervan Illustrated Bible Backgrounds Commentary on the Old Testament. And this is a great resource. Many of you have it, perhaps even through your, if you have Logos Bible software or some of the other, this particular multi-volume text. There are 5 volumes on the Old Testament, and there are 4 volumes New Testament. And this material is background material, we call it. It provides textual, cultural varieties of religious practices and everyday ways of life issues, description of terminology. And this particular passage in Genesis chapter 15 is elucidated by the various backgrounds of ancient Near Eastern texts. And so this is a very, very excellent resource about issues of adoption, heirship. Later on, we talk about the oral blessing and the birthright issues and so forth that come up in the Esau-Jacob story, and so forth. All of these are described in greater detail, and the world of practice that is elucidated by texts from the ancient Near Eastern world provide us great insights into what's going on in the life of Abraham. And basically, of course, we come to that conclusion that Abraham is proceeding along the norms of the world of his day. So again, so many of these texts come from ancient Sumerian, Assyrian, Babylonian, Akkadian culture of the 2nd and 1st millennia BC. And so this material is great for helping us to understand the world context in which God's revelation is being set forth. I always want to remind students that when we look at issues of biblical backgrounds, that we live in a marvelous day. Again, because I've spent a lot of time working at archaeology over the last 40 plus years, of going to Israel and other parts of the Middle East and the Mediterranean world of the New Testament, that the Bible comes alive with the contextual world in which it was occurred. God's revelation didn't come in a vacuum. And sometimes there's a tendency to read out of our own background, our own cultural mores, our cultural norms, our cultural practices, and interpret the text. But we have to look at the world in which God revealed himself to fully understand the full contextualization. You know, would that we had lived 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago when these events are unfolding, that we would have understood what Moses was trying to tell us. But we live several thousand years post fact. And so materials of the ancient Near Eastern studies are just so valuable in helping us understand the world of the Bible so that we can better contextualize and not misinterpret the text. We'll take it out of context, but read it in context, both in the Bible and with the resources of biblical background outside of the Bible. But we've talked about a couple of these aspects, and some of these, by the way, these aspects of biblical backgrounds can be used in the world of apologetics, our defense of the faith, and that we can assure our people in the pew, and we can confront those who want to decontextualize the Bible, say that it's not relevant, that it came from a different time than what it describes. But from the geography of Abraham's travels to the cultural events to the religious practices of the ancient world, all of these items are found fully in the world of the Bible that the Bible itself describes. So the ancient world of Mesopotamia, Canaan, Egypt are not created by later quote unquote biblical writers simply to try to create a prehistory of Israel from its before its kingdom history, as so many critical scholars today want to do. And so much of this background material can also serve in an apologetic setting, our defense of the faith, that people can have confidence that the Bible is real and in real time that it describes in the text itself. So again, aspect of our faith is built in additional confidence. Difficult to say, we prove the Bible with archaeology. I can establish events, direct parallels, but again, as verse 6 highlights, there is an aspect that we accept this by faith, but we have a faith that we believe is well-founded. Abraham's faith in this, when we have verse 6, is a statement of faith that will be reinforced later on in the text. God will bring forth an heir. And even later than Abraham and Sarah dreamed at when the first promise was given to them, when Abraham was 75. Yeah. Imagine that he's 99 when the promises come forth. That's 24 years after the initial promise. That's a long time to wait. And yet, Abram's faith will build through various encounters with God through these portions of the biblical text. So, just wanted to highlight these aspects of biblical backgrounds and the growing faith of Abraham. But this is kind of one of those we say that the writer here brings out in verse 6. He kind of stands back and makes this what we call a qualitative analysis of the faith of Abraham. That it's that which is being, has been, and will be unfolding in the future of the text as his faith is encouraged and more fully established in the bringing forth of an heir. But at this point, he's believing God, and righteousness is accrued to him as a result of his foundational faith as revealed in verse 6. Then as we go on to the next section, we'll see further how this aspect of his faith is going to unfold.